Welcome to Bible for Modern Minds podcast.
We're starting with just a profound paradox, a moment of despair and survival all at once.
Right. It's a really intense starting point.
Our subject, he's in this deep personal crisis, finds himself on the floor, and he's simultaneously attempting self-harm with pieces of metal.
But at the same time.
At the very same moment, he's also reaching for the wall phone, trying to dial a friend who worked at a crisis hotline.
That tension, giving up and reaching out in the same breath, that's really the core of the whole journey we're about to look at.
Exactly. And it's crucial to understand this wasn't just a general cry for help, though it was that too.
No, it was more. It was this really sophisticated intellectual search for what he called solid truth. His whole world felt like it was built on, postmodernism.
Where every answer is subjective.
Right, where nothing is really solid.
And that's our mission for this deep dive, to trace this incredibly personal roadmap. We're going to follow his path from a Reformed Jewish identity in the American Midwest through this kind of philosophical wilderness.
And all the way to a conviction he finds years later in Tel Aviv.
So for you, the listener, the real conflict to watch here is this collision between a deeply ingrained identity.
An identity reinforced by his rabbi, who told him flat out, "We don't believe in Jesus."
And on the other side, this pervasive sense of being broken. He said it himself. I never needed anything, yet I wasn't happy. He needed something specific.
Not just comfort, a revelation.
Okay, let's unpack that foundation because it really does set up the whole conflict. He grew up in a Reformed Jewish synagogue.
But the neighborhood itself was heavily Orthodox. So there's a subtle dissonance right from the start.
His Jewish identity was really built through, Friday services, Sunday school, because Saturdays were for soccer at the JCC.
And you see this sort of personalized tradition, right? They'd build a sukkah some years, they'd light Shabbat candles.
But then they'd blow them out early to go to an Indian restaurant.
Exactly. It's a cultural Judaism. But it was still so important to him, especially being one of just a few Jewish kids in his public school. He really clung to that identity.
But clinging to it got complicated. He remembers asking his rabbi about the Messiah and getting this almost contradictory answer.
Right. Either it's this idea that we are the Messiah, that we collectively change the world.
Or it's the philosophical idea that everything's right and nothing's right.
And that ambiguity is just critical for a young person who is really suffering internally. That's a void. That lack of a solid, dependable truth fed right into his depression.
And then you layer on this immense emotional pressure. He describes himself as a sensitive theater kid, someone who felt everything very deeply.
And a lot of that was made so much worse by a specific family trauma.
Yeah, his older brother.
His brother was struggling with some really hardcore substance abuse. LSD daily, we're told. Disappearing for long stretches to rehab.
And while his parents were away visiting his brother, he was at home. He was the one holding down the fort.
And he kept getting praised as the good son.
That label became this huge internal burden. He had to be perfect while his world was just spinning out of control.
And it all peaked in his teenage years, leading to that hospitalization after the suicide attempt we started with.
Despite the loving family, the financial security, he just felt totally disconnected. Like, just another number in a huge high school.
The very things that were supposed to give him certainty, his identity, his family, they all failed to give him a real sense of purpose, so he was ready to look anywhere else.
After that crisis, he said he was open to almost anything. He just sort of abandoned the religious structures he grew up with.
Because they felt too vague.
Right, and his search went global. He started reading texts like Autobiography of a Yogi and The Tao of Pooh.
And he really dove deep into Taoism in college. He trusted the wisdom he found in, the Eastern philosophies. They seemed to offer a structure that he was missing.
But even these systems, which he was hoping would give him that absolute truth, they ultimately let him down. And it's the specific details that a lot freaked him out.
Yes, and this is where you see his need for a single, non-contradictory truth come right back to the surface. With Taoism, he finds out it includes this belief in 10,000 gods inside your body, all fighting a constant battle.
That's not peaceful. For someone trying to escape chaos, that just sounds like more chaos.
Exactly. Just multiplied the problem. And then there were these huge spiritual penalties. He learned you could be haunted by your family for generations, for making one small mistake.
Wow. For a kid already burdened with being the good son, that's terrifying. It just introduces thousands of new ways to fail.
There was no solid foundation at all. And Buddhism had a similar moment for him. He learned about a concept where adherents could, like, call up a literal demon to act as a prophet to the Dalai Lama.
These specific, almost horrifying details, the demons, the internal battles, they just shattered the appeal.
They failed his test. He wasn't just looking for wisdom, he was looking for an unshakable foundation. And these systems were just trading one kind of ambiguity for another.
And yet, through all of this searching, he never totally let go of his Jewish identity. He said he still clung to that understanding that some part of me was connected to what it meant to be Jewish.
To the point where even while he's deep into Taoism, he's hosting a full Passover Seder for his college friends. The culture was still there, even if the faith was gone.
So that identity eventually leads him to a huge shift. He goes on the Birthright program. But the trip starts in Poland on the March of the Living.
And this provides such a critical emotional context. He talks about visiting the concentration camps in the dead of winter. He's bundled up in like 3 coats, but he's looking at photos of prisoners in these thin pajamas.
The visceral horror of that.
It was overwhelming. But then the whole narrative shifts. The group gets to Israel. They're on Mount Scopus overlooking Jerusalem. And in that moment, a rainbow appears.
That's this powerful piece of symbolism.
And someone recites the traditional blessing over a rainbow. Then someone else reads a text, probably from Ezekiel, about God bringing the Jewish people home. And for him, that was the first real breakthrough.
It was a true aha moment. He connected the dots right there and thought, maybe God is real. And maybe he used the horror of the Holocaust, not that he wanted it, but he used it to fulfill these ancient promises.
Turning what the world meant for bad to good is a huge theological shift. It's moving from an internal search for logic to seeing a potential purpose in this big external historical story.
He called it his first glimpse that God might be real. He immediately called his mom, wanted to stay.
But that good Jewish boy identity was still so strong, he went back to the U.S. to finish his degree. But that seed had been planted.
Fast forward a few years, he's back in Israel at Tel Aviv University for a master's program. And now the intellectual search is about to meet a real community.
Right. He meets a couple of students, and they invite him to a coffee shop on a Thursday night. Live music, free coffee.
That was a good draw.
And it turns out this place is run by Messianic Jewish people.
And out of 17 students who were invited, he was the only one who went. He said he was the only one crazy enough to go. And what was different this time was the lack of condemnation.
Yeah, no one was saying, oh, you're burning in hell because you're Jewish. He said they were just loving on me and caring about me.
That genuine care just broke down the walls. And the relationship moved from just coffee to, action. They invited him to help a single mom clean her house, buy food for Shabbat, and he said yes.
He saw faith being lived out as kindness, not just argued as philosophy.
And this leads him to a Wednesday night Bible study. It's super casual. They're singing songs, playing Uno. And it's there that someone finally hands him a New Testament.
At the first time. And he starts reading. They're in the Gospel of John, chapter 15, the vine and the branches. But the line that just floors him is, no greater love than he who gives his life for a friend.
And he realized Jesus didn't just teach that, he actually did it. The historical reality of that sacrifice, that felt solid.
But the internal war isn't over. The intellectual side is softening, but the identity fear is still massive.
So his friend Beto, who's from Mexico, asks him to make a promise.
A very specific promise.
Yeah.
To pray every single night for about a month, God, if Jesus is the Messiah, reveal it to me. It was the perfect test for him. It demanded a specific external answer.
And he did it. And during that month, he has these 2 incredibly vivid, unexplainable flood dreams. He writes them down immediately.
One is in New York City. It's all chaos and screaming. The other is a week later in Beijing, and it's totally peaceful. And he's never been to either city.
So he's still held back, but he's curious. He visits a local congregation and sees an announcement for a seminar on dreams and prophecy.
It felt like a sign. He goes to this 3-day seminar, and he emails his 2 unshared flood dreams to the organizers.
The final session is on a Saturday evening, just as Shabbat is ending. The teaching couple gets up to speak again, and they choose his 2 dreams to discuss publicly, the New York flood and the Beijing flood.
That's already incredible validation. But the final confirmation was even more specific. As the service is ending, during the last song, the woman who was teaching, she walks straight through the crowd to him.
puts her hand on his shoulder.
and delivers the exact answer to the private prayer he'd been praying alone every night for a month. She says, God hears your prayer, Jesus is real, and he has great plans for your life.
He hadn't told anyone the content of that prayer, not even Beto. He'd only shared the dreams by email. He couldn't logically deny it anymore.
He just broke down crying. He said the weight of feeling like he had to be the good son, the one who was going to save the world, this collective Messiah, it was just lifted. Someone else had already done it. That was November 2005.
And his life really did change. He says he still has hard days, still has questions.
Sure, the human experience doesn't just vanish.
Right. But the depression lessened. It was replaced by a hope that sustains him. He eventually got married, and now he has 2 kids growing up in Israel.
Before we wrap up, we have to touch on that identity question again. For you, the listener, how did he bridge that gap? How did he get over the fear of opening a book he'd been told his whole life not to touch?
He came to see the New Testament not as a foreign text, but simply as a Jewish book. It was written by Jewish men who believed the promises in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, were fulfilled in Jesus.
So it's about continuity, not cancellation. The idea isn't that they stopped being Jewish. It's that this book completes God's story of redemption. It provided that solid, non-contradictory foundation that philosophy never could.
It connects his own personal story of brokenness to this ancient national story of redemption. It gave him a purpose rooted in both his heritage and a specific claim of truth.
What an incredible journey. From a personal crisis in the Midwest, through the history of Poland, to the spiritual intensity of Tel Aviv, it really moved from a search for intellectual certainty to something else.
Radical personal conviction. He was looking for this logical, philosophical structure that could hold up against postmodern doubt. But what finally broke through wasn't an abstract argument. It was a series of hyperspecific personal confirmations. The dreams, the seminar, the woman delivering the exact answer to his private prayer. And that raises a really important question for you, the listener. He was seeking philosophical proof, but he receives radical, unprovable specificity. So what is the nature of truth when it's revealed not through universal logic, but through tailored external validation? What kind of external proof would you require to fundamentally shift a core identity belief?